guys, the Curious Owl here, and today I will be sharing with you guys my June wrap-up. So as most of you know, if you've been paying attention to any of the things I've been putting out in this past month, June was a fairly rough month for me mentally. There was a lot of bad things that had happened in the course of this month, not just to me, but what seems to be many people. June was a pretty rough month, it seemed like, for a lot of people, not just in terms of the news, but personal-wise, a lot of bad things seem to have happened. But despite that, I still did manage to, I think, reasonably get through quite a few things. I'm actually pretty impressed with how much I was able to get through since there was the unfortunate incident with my husband's family that happened in the middle of the month, but I'm pretty proud of the fact that I did get through what I could this month. Before I get into the actual full wrap-up, I am going to tell you guys what exactly I'm currently working on, because the day I'm filming this is June 30th, and I'm not going to finish this last book before the end of the day, but it is something I am basically carrying over from June into July. So the book I'm currently working on is Shadows of Self by Brandon Sanderson. This is book 2 in Mistborn Era 2. I'm currently about 61 pages into this, and again, I'm not going to finish it by the end of the day, but I am looking to make more progress on it as the day goes on. But the pages involved for this book are not being counted for my full pages read, because I would rather it count for July, since this is going to end up being finished in the month of July. So with that out of the way, let's go into the stats for the month of June. So in June, I read a total of 2,114 pages and had 0 minutes worth of audiobooks. I had 6 of the books I read this month were physical out of the 7 total I read, and I had 1 ebook, and all of the books I read were from my personal library. Out of those books, in terms of star ratings, I had 3 that were 5 stars, 3 that were 4 stars, and 1 book that was unfortunately a 2-star, but overall, not a bad month. Alright, so now let's get into the books. First of all, I did end up finishing The Hero of Ages. I don't think I ended up counting the pages for this in June, so my pages might be slightly off. I don't know why. I feel like I just forgot to mark things off for this one, but I did rate this a 5 out of 5 stars. I absolutely loved the ending of Mistborn Era 1. I thought this was absolutely wonderful, and I did the live show with Bree and Brandy and Dion, and it was so much fun. I will link that live show down below if you guys would like to check it out and hear my thoughts on this. The next book I read was the Royally Booked Book Club pick for May that I did not get to, and so I ended up reading it in June, and that was Therithmetist by Brandon Sanderson. This is the first book in, I believe, what will become a trilogy in this world. Basically, it is separate from the Cosmere, but this is a young adult mystery thriller with some fantastical aspects, and I gave this a 4 out of 5 stars. I really liked this a lot, but I did feel that I didn't fully grasp the mechanics of the world, which is fine. It's just something that I think is very confusing for somebody that is not a very math-based person, because this deals a lot with what is called Therithmetisty, which essentially is a form of magic that involves the use of circles and other forms of geometry and lines in order to battle other people, and the concept of all of that was very weird. I didn't quite grasp all of it, but I did like what the overall story was about, and so I really did enjoy it. The next book I read was Supernova by Marissa Meyer, finally completing the reread/finish series that I did of this. I do have a full review of this book as well you can go check out, that I will leave linked below, but gave this a 5 out of 5 stars. Probably one of the best endings to a trilogy I have read, especially in this case, because I think that everything was wrapped up so well. I think that other than Hero of Ages also being one of the best endings to a trilogy I could have asked for, this was a very close tie with that. I think that those 2 books are my favorite endings to trilogies I've seen so far. The next book I read was A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas. This was also to be a part of a read-along book club almost kind of thing with Princess from Castle Library, similar to the Royally Booked Book Club. This, though, was basically a book where I had been meaning to read it for a long time, and I never really had a chance to until now. because the readathon we are doing is in anticipation for Princess's upcoming renewing of her vows, and it is very much inspired by the aesthetics that are involved with A Court of Thorns and Roses. But having read this for the first time, I was actually massively impressed. I will say that the first third of this was not really that great. I felt that it was a little pedantic at times, but I really liked how things went after that first third, and I'm excited to read the next book because I think this is going to turn out to be a favorite of mine. The next book I read almost in an entire day. Like, I read the majority of this in one day, and it was The Lightning Thief by Rick Riordan. This was my Wheel of D20 pick for the month of June, so I did complete the Wheel of D20 this month, which I'm very excited about. And this was to read a book that was highest rated on my Goodreads, and I never read this series as a kid. Truthfully, I never did. I don't know why. I read Rick Riordan's other series, The Kane Chronicles, and I really loved it. And I've read a lot of books from the imprint he created with Disney Hyperion, but I never actually read the Percy Jackson series. But I was so impressed with what this was, and I will say that I feel that there were some things I wish would have been explored a little bit more. I did feel that all of the adults were doing that really awful stereotype of, you know, thinking that the kid is not mature enough to understand what's going on when clearly he is, and clearly they know he's mature enough. So that was like the biggest gripe I had with it, but that is a gripe I tend to have a lot of times with middle grade stories where the main character has obviously gone through trauma and nobody thinks that they can actually handle the information involved in that trauma. But gave it a 4 out of 5 stars, really liked this, and I am very excited to hopefully get through more of this series here fairly soon. If I can manage it, I'd like to have some availability to throw in some middle grade, and with having started this series officially, I'd like to be able to finish it here maybe by the end of the year. The next book I read was my most disappointing book of the month and is one of my most disappointing reads of the year, and that is The Alloy of Law by Brandon Sanderson. This is the 4th book in the Mistborn series, but the first book in the second era. You guys, I was reading Shadow of Self. Currently, this is the first book in that trilogy. I really dislike this for a lot of reasons. I found it incredibly boring. I found that it really just did not hit the same way that Mistborn Era 1 did, and for a lot of reasons. I also don't really like the fact that the Alamancy is not really as prevalent as it was in Mistborn Era 1. I have a lot of issues with how things have gone so far with the overall feel and tone of this, but I do really like the mystery aspect that is thrown into this story, and so I would like to see that continue, and I can already see in Shadows of Self that it is. But basically this is following events that happened 300 years after the first Mistborn era, where essentially we have our main character who is kind of like what they call a lawman or a cop of sorts. He's investigating the disappearances and robberies that are going on in this world currently, especially when it involves his fiance who is kidnapped at a wedding party that they are at prior to their own wedding, and so he's trying to figure out how things are going on. And the twist at the end of this that I really appreciated, I'm very excited to see happen later on, does involve a character that we've known since the first era of Mistborn, so I'm very excited to see how that continues. But overall, this just did not hit the way I wanted it to, considering how much I loved Era 1. And then piggybacking right off of that, I did end up completing one of the short stories in the Arcanum Unbounded, which was Alamancerjack and the Pits of Eltania. Essentially, this is just a collection of short stories basically that involve, I believe, a fictional character, or maybe not so much fictional, but fictionalized character. Basically a guy who went on these crazy adventures and had his stories written down and shared with the public by a terraceman who was one of his friends. And essentially it's just some crazy adventures that involve the Koloss. And the Koloss we haven't really seen much of since Mistborn Era 1. They were mentioned a little bit in the second era, but not nearly as prevalent as they were in Era 1. But I really appreciated that this also brought in the idea that there is a very powerful thing that was left behind from Era 1 that is incredibly important to the Koloss, and I don't want to say what it is or what it does because it will spoil the whole thing and spoil quite a bit of what the series is getting into, but was really impressed with this one. Actually liked it a lot more than the first short story we read involved with Mistborn, and I gave that story a 5 out of 5 stars. So that being said, those are all the things I read in the month of June. I know this was a fairly quick video considering how much I do like to talk about some of these things, but I am on a very tight schedule today, so I don't have a lot of time to talk about a lot of these. But I do have more in-depth thoughts about some of these in my vlogs from June if you would like to go check those out. Thank you guys so much for joining me in this video. If you guys did enjoy it, please do give it a big thumbs up. And if you haven't already and you'd like to be, I would like to see more content like this, go ahead and hit that button down below and subscribe to become an owlet in our flock. And I will see all of you guys in my next video. Bye guys!